Recording in progress. You ever hear that on your computer? I'm a work in progress. I'm a mess in progress. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Alive and Unwell. Clever title. Got to give me that, man. Oh, God. I get so anxious before I do these fucking things. I'm doing it for my mental health. My wife is, she's the love of my life. And she's the producer of this thing. She's a smart woman. She was in the record business for a long time. Great publisher. But I didn't need a producer for this. But I had to do it. Marc Maron. Marc fucking Maron. What the fuck, man? How great is this guy? The only thing I told him once, that I said, I wish we hung out together a lot more. And in fact, much at all. I'm from another generation before, but he's such a cool dude, man, and so smart. And we have a lot of similarities, I think. That makes me really enjoy him even more. We'll discuss it or none of it. But I think I'll praise him to his face. So thanks for coming back. This is not a very upbeat introduction, but you know what? I'm not an upbeat kind of guy. And I'm just not. And I'm not defined by my Parkinson's, by the way. I was telling my wife, we were discussing this. I've had it for a couple of years, and I'm doing the best I can. And I did Curve this season 12, but it doesn't define me. But there's a lot of people that have it much worse than me now, and I just have some occasional trouble walking. But for those who have it worse and have anything bad, you just got to keep plugging away, man. And that's why I'm doing this, partly because I want to show people that you can move ahead, even if you're fighting a disease. And I'm the producer has been helping me a great deal with my life, much more with my life than with this show, honey. She's I was always alone on the road for 53 years. And when I act, I isolate. I like to just prepare. But this is with my wife. It's like, it's hilarious to hear anything about anything creative from someone close to you, at least for me. I don't know what I'd do without him. Okay, I'm going to let Marc in and see if he can save the day. Marc Maron, what the fuck, ladies and gentlemen? Here's the king of podcasts. Marc.
Yes.
I hope you didn't hear that I was embarrassed. Did you hear anything? You didn't hear anything I said, did you?
I was shut out, Richard. I was shut out from the conversation.
That's, sort of like a Russian thing, man, like a Putin deal. I
Yeah,
shut you out.
I was waiting in solitary until my turn to testify.
Well, let me ask you, first of all, I had this daydream the other day
Yeah.
that there were, this is not, I'm talking to the king of podcasters. And so this isn't a podcast, not what I'm doing. I just want you to know I'm just very insecure about what I'm doing. And
Wait.
now, so I had this daydream, Marc, that there was like me and 5 other lunatics who
Yeah.
all wanted to start a podcast. And we're like that scene in Wizard of Oz. We're walking, and there you are, man. At the end, you're Oz, and you're there with and that's how I feel. You're gonna have to.
I'm the insecure man behind the curtain.
You're not that insecure as far as I'm concerned. What is that shirt? What does that say? New Mexico?
Yeah, that's where I grew up. But wait, what are you afraid of? You mean what are you insecure about? Talking? You're Richard Lewis. You're just talking.
But I'm talking to the insecure man. That's true. That Oz was the insecure. That's a bad analogy.
Oh, I get what you're saying, but this is it's like I've always done it, and like when I did it with you, the first time, it's just we just talk about stuff, and well, how are you? All right?
Oh, that's very kind. I had a little thing with my wife today
What
because,
kind of thing?
well, a little bit of a tiff. I mean, I have, she's right in some regards. I mean, I've had a long career and I'm 76 years old, and having Parkinson's and all these
Yeah.
surgeries prior doesn't define me. And I know where she's coming from.
Yeah.
But like, and I want to talk about early days, both
Sure.
of ours, and compare them. But on this note, she's right, and she's caring about me. But when I used to when I went on stage for half a century and I did all those talk shows, no matter how prepared you think you are, or they do these pre-interviews, which are fucking mind-boggling, and
Yeah.
horror shows. You know, when you're a comic, what are you going to talk about? Fuck off. You know, and you're very similar. I mean, I didn't want to ever tell anybody that. So right now, I guess in this little podcast of mine, my wife thinks that I shouldn't define myself because I've mentioned Parkinson's every time, and I've done it again. So, but
Yeah, but like those
let me.
pre-interviews.
Mark. What
Yeah.
my last point, which I didn't make, was that no matter what I told them, my first instinct on talk shows was to just say whatever was on my mind,
Yeah.
and I throw the dice because you know damn well, back when you're young, that if
Yeah.
you fuck up, you're done. If you don't
Yeah.
follow the talent coordinator.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember those pre-interviews, and some of them would go on forever. Like when I did it, it was different, I think, when you started and there was just three networks, and you had 20 million people watching whatever the hell you did. I would stay on the phone with Frank Smiley at Conan for like
Oh,
an hour and a half. They would call me 2 days before when they'd have a guest fallout, and they knew that, I modeled my Conan experience after you. I very quickly, when I did Conan, I did stand up on Conan twice, maybe in the second year they were on. And then I was like, I want to be Richard Lewis. I want to just sit down and do that. I want to be a panel guy. I don't want to do the stand up anymore because I think I'm a panel guy. So and that was because of you, really. And I wanted to be that kind of guest. I wanted to be this sort of like, oh, here we go. Here's Maron. What has he got? But I would be on the phone with the segment producer for an hour and a half, just, sharing, sort of half-baked premises that were funny enough conversation. The great thing about doing panel, as you know, is that you don't have to land. You can just talk. And, you weren't standing up there for 4.5 minutes with with a destination in mind. You just had to be funny. And if you knew the host well enough, you'd be like, well, he'll save me. Hey, if worse comes to worse, this guy will step in, which wasn't always the case with Conan, but those segment producer calls were always, I did, who was the worst at it, like who really fucked my head up was what was his name? The
which
Scottish
show?
the Scottish guy.
The late. Yeah, my brain is fried.
Yeah, mine just is fried too, but I know that guy.
Yeah. What the fuck is his name? Jesus.
He was there
Look at
for
that. And
with the
you're
robot. Yeah, yeah.
how old were you when I started in 71? I'm jumping around. How old were you in 1971?
I was I was like 8.
Were you watching me at all at that point, or
Not when I
guess
was
not?
8. I
I
think
know, I know.
I think the first time I was watching you, it must have been on those early Lettermans, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I did
No,
about
probably a
50.
little before. But but
Yeah,
but the point being is that it's so fucking funny. I can't remember that guy's name, but he had a
yeah,
segment.
me too. The Scottish, but that was the one show, by the way, that they never asked me, as I recall, because he ad libbed. He loved his ad libbing, and I just free associated with that guy. I
Yeah,
can't believe we don't have his name. Do you have a? Where's my producer, honey? Look this up.
yeah.
Oh well,
Hold on.
thank you. Now, I told my wife not to be listening, and I apologize, Joyce. You meant well about the
Craig
part.
Ferguson.
Craig.
All right, so his segment producer would keep me on for like an hour and a half, and they would ask me they would ask me shit like, all right, so where were you born? Like, what the fuck is this? But it fucked my head up because you go out there not knowing which of the 90 things you gave the guy Craig was going to come up with, and half of them weren't even funny. And I realized it was just his way of like fucking with your head so he could never shut up. Like it was just it was a nightmare because he didn't care. He didn't want it. He barely wanted to talk to you. And then there's other people who now, like, this is my experience. You can tell me yours.
Yeah.
Like, there's people like, I'll go on Colbert. I don't do it that often, but he's a very earnest guy. He's not, comedically, quick in the way that Letterman or Carson was, or even
Yeah.
yeah, or Kimmel. And like, I went on there and his producers are like, just do what you did last time. Just go. And I'm like, was he okay with that? Because I got long bits, I'll do them. And they're like, just do it. And he just sat back and took it, but he didn't look happy about it. And now for me, I actually like doing Jimmy Fallon more than any of them. You know why?
Real
Because
loose, isn't he?
that's it. Is that all? When you go out and do Fallon, all you're just looking at a guy who's looking at you, going like, "Come on, do it. Make me. Let's do it."
That's good. I did a show before he got this last spot, and he came into my dressing room, and well, I'll tell you something. I don't,
Yeah.
I'm at the point in my life now that I'm going to say things that I'm going to regret, but I don't care. I
Yeah.
don't care anymore. I
You don't have
really
to.
don't care anymore.
Zero
But
fucks is good. That's
this
you
is not
should
like a this is
call
not
the
a big
show that. You should call the show Zero Fucks with Richard Lewis.
I was promoting a book. I had a tour, and it was some other shit. I was doing it was like a three-headed monster of publicity.
Yeah.
And Jimmy was like at the center of this, and then I would go out and do all these interviews and radios and all that shit. And I got sick. I had food poisoning the night before.
Yeah.
And my publicist happened to be there, and my wife was with me. Joyce was with me, and I was so sick. And we had a doctor come over, and he says, "Take these pills." And I was on the toilet the whole night. And my publicist said, "You got to cancel. You have to cancel."
Yeah.
I said, I'm not fucking canceling. This is like when when you go on. Well, when I'm talking to people out there, it's not you, of course, because you know all of this in spades. But when you're planning a publicity tour, you don't want to fuck it up at the last minute. It just gets unwieldy. So my publicist said, "You've been on the toilet for the last 24 hours." And my wife said, "You're all pale. You're almost jaundiced.
Yeah.
You can't do the show." And the show was in the afternoon. Like they pick you up at 3. So I said, "I'm doing the show," and they're all particularly my publicity agent.
Yeah.
She said, "I don't. This is not what I want you to do." I said, "I'm doing it," because they thought I was going to shit my pants on the show, and that would be my Wikipedia line. He shit in his pants on Fallon, and all the other stuff, But I did it, and I was in my dressing room, and I was praying to God that I wouldn't even fart, because that could unleash a Niagara Falls and the end of everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Fallon comes in, and he was telling me, he was very kind to me. He said, "I watched your early specials," and he was doing old jokes. Whenever people come over to you, like young comedians or anybody, and tells jokes that you've done on a special.
Yeah.
And how it meant, and I've been living with that joke. It's my mother, or it's my chick, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was making him laugh, and I couldn't wait for him to get out of the room, because if I kept laughing, it would have been a disaster. And they introduced me. I get on, and I didn't, I did it. I killed, because I said, "This might be my last show in show business, so go for broke." And it was a great shot, but I didn't, and then I came back, and they were watching that night. I said, "You'll see at 11:30, whenever the fuck it was on."
Yeah. Yeah.
But Frank Smiley, I got to just chime in. I was laughing when you were talking about Frank.
Yeah.
I mean, with all due respect, I guess to these kind of producers, and I think the producer is the next step up, assistant producer. They have to, their job is to make sure the star is comfortable and has some clue of what to ask. I mean, I get that. But when you said you can't nail it any better, when were you born? How many houses were on your street? When it gets to that level, you want to fucking strangle the phone and hang up.
Well, the funniest thing about Frank was, like, because I work with him a lot, putting segments together, is I knew how it would work. I would call him for the call, and I'd be pacing in my house in my apartment in New York, and I'd just be doing the stuff. I've been laying it out there, and then, like, I would know when things would land with Frank, because he would actually laugh a little bit. But most of the time I would do this thing. I do a minute of stuff, and he'd go, "Yeah, what else you got? You got anything else?"
Yeah, of course. That's exactly right. And then when and you go through all this shit the day before, you're in the dressing room, you're in your dressing room, and when he comes in, it was like a big Mark Bergman character, holding a scythe and with a black cape on. So, Frank, I talked to you enough. I don't want to see it. Then he says, "Are you ready?" Don't say if I'm ready. Don't tell me if I'm ask me if I'm fucking ready. It drove me nuts. And we were great and we were still friends. But I mean,
Yeah.
he took it so seriously. But no one took it. No one was more disastrous to comedians than I think. I don't know if he passed away. It was a guy named Jim McCauley on the old Tonight Show. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
with
I always
Johnny.
heard about him, but I didn't,
Whoa.
I didn't I didn't know that world. It's weird, Richard, because lately, I've been for some reason I've been watching a lot of old. I've been watching old Carson pieces, but primarily with Rickles and Dangerfield.
Yeah, of course. It doesn't better. It doesn't get better.
But you know what I noticed about them is that there was always this idea that Rickles is like the thing that makes him work is that he really is a big-hearted guy, and he's just trying to get a laugh or whatever. But the thing I never realized about Rickles is he's drowning almost immediately. Like he gets on stage and like after the first line he's just floundering and scrambling and blasting away. And if you really watch him, I would say 1 out of 4 of them hit, but it didn't matter, because he had this cadence. And sometimes, like, I'm not even sure I believe that he was such a magnanimous guy because he was seriously seething at times, just to get the laugh. And he didn't
Right.
give a fuck. He would take shots at Carson that were deep, and
Right.
and you could see Carson take the hit, but they somehow tolerated it because I think they needed Rickles to keep them fucking, real. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. I know what you mean. And just getting back briefly to the talent
McCauley?
coordinators
Yeah.
on Letterman one night. This was another the Rubicon for me.
Who was
This was
that? Eddie
after
Brill? Was it Eddie? Who was the talent? Who was the producer?
well,
Second.
early on it was Morton, and then I don't know
Oh
who
yeah,
I
Morton.
talked
Yeah,
to.
yeah, Morton.
That was a
Okay.
long time ago. But I had this routine.
Yeah.
I hate calling that back in the day. I guess I call it a hunk, whatever the fuck it is.
Dunk.
I was in Hawaii, and I had gone to Hawaii,
Yeah.
and I had a lot of thoughts about it and jokes and premises, and so I'm sitting there, and then Dave said to me, "I guess it's time for your Hawaiian hunk," and my face just it changed colors, man. It was spinning around like The Exorcist. I
Yeah.
was so I was so taken aback. It was like a left hook by Joe Frazier.
Yeah.
So after I don't know how I did that night. I probably did okay, and we'll talk about panel too, because as opposed to stand up. But I went backstage, and this is not in my sober years, I might add. And
Yeah.
I started fucking screaming and pounding the fucking walls. I take this craft so seriously, and I always did when I did it, that
Yeah.
I just felt so humiliated that it was not going to be spontaneous. He sucked the spontaneity out of me saying, "Hey, it's good to be back. I was traveling, and just I could have gotten to Hawaii any which way rather than I guess it's time for your Hawaiian hunk."
Yeah, but that was just David being David, right? I mean, you knew the
Yes,
guy.
that was
And
David being David. But in my drinking days, I wasn't necessarily high or drunk
right,
on
I get
many
it.
shots, but
But
I
you were
still was pissed. But had I been sober, I might have went, no, no, I would have taken him to task for saying that. I would have talked to him like I'm talking to you now. How dare you? How dare you bring up Hawaii? Maybe I was, and maybe I would have fucked around with him too. But it
yeah.
was Dave being Dave.
But it's a funny thing about guys who work like us, so is that there is like we always leave room for spontaneity, but we
right,
are professional comics, and even even Lenny, after a certain point, I mean, how many times had he done the lost wages bit? I mean, there is a point where you have bits, and whether you leave room for improvisation or not, that's up to you. But it's funny with guys like us is that there's a time in our careers where you don't want whoever to acknowledge that it's a bit because our style is conversational. So
that's right.
if you acknowledge that it's a chunk, then it's sort of like you're ruining the illusion. I make this stuff up on the fly, which we do a lot of times, but we definitely have things to land on.
Right, we're good actors. I mean, a lot of times if we're repeating stuff that we worked around on tour, you know, we have to act as if it's like it's just coming up for the first. So I went crazy,
Yeah.
Mark, and I get back to the hotel and the phone's ringing off the fucking hook. A phrase I rarely use, I might add. And
back when we had those kind of phones, yeah.
Yes, then it could be. Then it got. So it's Letterman's office.
Yeah.
And all they said was, Dave wants to see you tomorrow at noon.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was fucking ready. I went, you know what? I'm ready. Bring him on.
Yeah.
I've been great on this show. And he wants to undermine me. I walk into his office. He's sitting there. And I say nothing. And the first thing out of his mouth was, I was wrong. And it was like, then it just blew my mind. And then I went on to do another 20 or 30 shots.
Sure.
But that was a surprise, you know. But dig this, the Tonight Show, which is before you with Macaulay.
Yeah.
I would tape the it had to be 5.5 minutes. And then I would tape it at the club. And I remember I might have said some of these things or written about him, and I apologize, Mark, for that. But you know, I'm trying to bring in all these people that you've been mentioning. I have.
All right, go ahead.
It's like peppers my life and my past. But I would go to the Improv to try to get my 5.5 minute routine together, and Rodney would often be there, and I hung with Rodney, and he drank a lot after that, and smoked, and you know he was a trip. You know, what can I say? And everyone and I used to do his nightclub in New York.
Yeah, you're the one who told me about
I'm going off in different avenues. He used to call us at the Improv or Catch a Rising Star, and during prom season in particular. He hated children. He hated to perform in front of children.
Yeah.
And he would call up and get on the phone and go, hey, Richard, it's Rodney. I don't do a good reason. It's Rodney. Come down. I'll give you $50, you know. So I would go down there and I'd go into his dressing room. It was 5x6 with a little table. And all of a sudden he says, I want you to get something to eat before the show. And I said, fine, give me a hamburger. He said, it's my joint. You don't get a hamburger, you get a steak, you know? So I said, okay, give me a filet mignon. Thank you. They bring up the steak and he gets up just as I'm going to eat it and walks 2 feet to just a sink in the room, takes out his schlong and pisses in the sink. It's like one of those Navy movies, submarine movies. It was like I said, Rodney, why did you? I couldn't eat the steak. I mean, this is not the topping I wanted, you know. And I said, why do you piss in your sink? And he says, because I'm too big. He said, because I'm too big to walk down the hall, you know. And I knew exactly what he meant. I knew exactly. And then when I would finally, they said, Louis, you're on. I'd walk down, and he was in his robe oftentimes with his song, you know, wagging in the, swaying in the breeze. And he walks to the edge of the stage, and it's all kids in tuxedos and corsages and all that shit, which he hated.
I did those
shows. And a nightmare. And he went on stage, just 1 foot on stage, and he says, he was maybe the worst introduction in comedy history. He said at the time, he said, you're going to like this guy. He has hair, you know? And then he got off. That's who he was.
You're the one who told me about when we talked the first time on my show. You told me about the heaviness.
Well, he used to do that on TV. Yeah. You know, it's the heaviness. I mean, it's so hip.
It's so good.
It really is so. And you're talking about rhythm. You know, he used to. I don't know how many joke writers he had. I don't know how much he came up with, but I do know he worked so fucking hard. He lived for Johnny like I lived for David, and he would work out these routines endlessly until every 6 weeks he'd probably go on. 6 weeks the most he'd have to wait, and he was so on fire my wife and I, when I'm depressed, I said just put him on. Yeah, I just want to lay back and. Because he's the greatest comedy machine as far as I'm concerned.
And when I watch him now, I watch him sometimes, and it's so funny. There are moments where Carson, he was hyper attuned to the audience. He's definitely kind of one of us, a very sensitive, kind of heavy-hearted dude. And like when he'd be in the chair doing jokes, if something didn't land, he'd say things like, "Is that mic working or is it not working? Is that mic?" or I loved when when Johnny would try to engage him in regular conversation as opposed to jokes, and it would just throw him. He's like, what do you want? You know, like he
That's right.
didn't want to have a regular conversation.
No, but that's right. And also, he knew exactly what he had in his head for that shot.
Right.
So sometimes if he went too fast and he's on panel, he's still doing it. Johnny doesn't. Not Johnny just sits back. He can say, "How you doing?" Now, I'll tell you, my kids are killing me.
Yeah.
He had to get. So what? A couple of shots when I see it on YouTube, I love it because I know exactly what's going on. There was one shot where he's killed on stand up. He's killing on panel.
Yeah.
And he ran out, and he went. Yeah. So that's it, Johnny. You know, that's it. He called his own shots. When I heard that, and Johnny said, "What do you mean?" He said, "That's all there is," you know, because he was just unbelievable, man. You know, Jackie Mason, who didn't do well on talk shows, but when you're talking about rhythms, that rhythm, as far as I'm concerned, when you see him, he doesn't even, and he had great premises and jokes, but when he was just saying, "You're wearing a shirt. Why should you wear a shirt? I don't want to wear a shirt. You have to wear."
Yeah.
I mean, he's getting them on a roll with that rhythm, and very few people can do that.
I think well, Rickles had a rhythm too. There was just all these, you know, Borscht Belt or post Borscht Belt guys that just had a cadence, like, you know, because a lot of times I realize with Rickles, you're laughing at something that doesn't even make sense. You know, like he could come out and go like, "What are those pants? What, you have eggs today?" And it's like, what does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything, but you know,
that's right.
I'll tell you a good secondhand Rodney story. I love it. It's my favorite Rodney story. It's not mine, but you know, Rodney, you know, when Kennison was big, you know, Rodney made Sam. And you know, and Sam was Sam, and I knew Sam, you knew Sam, I knew Sam pretty well. He was a fucking, you know, chaos machine, you know, real fuck. But apparently there was one of these times where Sam had, you know, been up at his house. He'd been going at it for like 3 days, and he was upset about a woman or whatever. But he was just, you know, you know what a place looks like after a 3-day party, right? So somebody calls Rodney to come over and talk to him, right? And apparently Rodney walks in. He looks around the room. He looks at Sam. He goes, "Oh, look at little Nero."
Oh, that's so perfect. That's
so
him.
Great. And the other Morton story, I want to tell you a Morton story because
please.
You know, I met Morton here and there, but like back before, long before I did Letterman, when I was in New York, I was walking around the village with CK, you know, back when we were friends, and he was doing his first Letterman, like the next day, and literally, you know, like the day before, the Oklahoma City bombing happened, right?
The day before.
It was like, you know, maybe 2 days before. I just remember like, you know, I don't know what to do. This just happened. I got to do this tonight. And of course, me being me, and probably you being you, I'm like, well, you got to talk about it, right? How are you not going to talk about it? He's doing a stand-up set, his first fucking shot of Letterman. I'm like, how are you not going to bring it up? That's the way my brain worked at the time. It's like, figure it out, bring it up. And apparently Louis goes to the show and he's talking to Morton, and he says, you know, I was, you know, this bombing is terrible. And, you know, I was talking to Maron, and he said, you know, like, you know, I got to bring it up. And Morton said, yeah, that's why Maron's not doing the show.
Oh, Jesus. That's hilarious. But when did you finally do Letterman?
Oh, it took years. You know, it took years. I guess, I mean, I ended up doing it maybe, you know, like 4 times stand up, maybe 3 times stand up and 1 time panel before he left. And my stand-up set, like, it was sort of weird and timeless. It doesn't even look like me. I'm wearing this very shiny suit, and I chose not to have a mic because I realized that my heroes never had mics on those shows. You know, anyone who brings a mic onto those sets, it's just a crutch. It's a comfort thing. So like, I was doing hand movements I didn't know I had. It was like the spirit of comedy spoke through me, and I did all the jokes perfectly. But I can't say it was really, you know, who I am, but it was a stellar set. And I was just, I was so thrilled about it. And then when I finally got to do panel with him, it was pretty great, because I remember after like my first or second set, you know, I did the set, and then I went and sat down for a second. We didn't really talk, but you know, when we were cutting away to commercial, you know, Letterman leans in, he goes, "You can make that stuff work on the road."
Yeah, he was something. You know, he told, I might have mentioned this to you before, and I'll make it brief. But before Letterman got his show, he called me, or his manager called me. He said, David wants to meet with you. This is like in 81 before he got the 82 show. And it was an observation he made about me, which was true, but I was surprised that he would be so caring. Anything coming from my childhood, anything like this is, oh, you
Yeah.
really are looking out for me? This is
Yeah,
unbelievable. He says, I've been watching you, well, we hung out at the clubs here in LA. And he says, I see you with Johnny. And, it's hit and miss because you're so physical that you're moving away from the camera and it looks amateurish. He says, you come to New York, and he might not remember this, but he said, you come to New York, work on the show, you can still do stand-up. I said, no, I just moved out here 4 years ago. I can't, I don't have my head together to go to New York. But he says, well, you can do the show as much as you want, but never do stand-up. And I use that as a precedent for every show. If they want me to do stand-up, no, I don't. Because at that point, I didn't give a shit what they wanted. I wanted to be funny and entertaining, but
also the thing about us is that, when you do long form stuff, whether you're riffing or you're not riffing,
right.
a lot of times it doesn't, it's not packaged like a joke. When you got to do 4.5, 5.5 minutes of jokes, it's almost like that scene in Butch and Sundance, when they're trying to get the job to protect the money going over the mountain. And I think it's Strother Martin, asks Sundance, can you shoot? And he throws a piece of wood out there, and Redford, as Sundance is standing still, and he shoots and he shoots and he shoots, and he keeps missing the wood. And Strother Martin's like, well, that's no good. And he goes, well, can I move? He's like, I don't care. And then he moves, and he just blows the thing apart. That's part of the gimmick, right? That's part of the skill. So I think it's a relief when guys who do long form or have an energy that they have to lock into, doing just a straight stand-up set's a fucking nightmare, kind of. It's like this odd skill that you kind of have to not move, and you have to, kind of like just present. It's hard to be your full self in those moments.
Absolutely. And I had mentioned this story, I don't know how years ago, but I'll abbreviate it. When Macaulay had me on the show, I actually opted many times to be with guest hosts, because Letterman was a guest host. There were about 7 or 8 of them. Joe Rivers and many. Then they just said, just come and sit down. And I killed on the back. And that's what I want. And then they finally saw that. And then I think it was after a sitcom with Jamie Lee Curtis or something. They said, all right, just sit down. But before that, back in the 80s, before I got the show, it's so alien to me. The craft is so important to us. And it didn't matter to me that I had a sitcom, and that would all of a sudden put me on the couch. I'm better on the couch, period, on a television show.
Well, you were my model for that. That's why I said to Conan, I just want to do the panel like Richard, because then I can do what I do.
Right. And I did Conan a number of times. He was very kind to me as well. But when I was doing stand-up with Johnny, before I got to know him, and we were both nuts. He was pretty crazy too, and he understood my stuff. And but at any rate, I'm doing this monologue, and I saw about a month ago on the rerun on the Johnny Carson on the Tonight Show with Carson, and there's an edit. It's a really weird edit. They edit to the audience, and the reason they did it was I did this routine on the Division of Motor Vehicles. And it was 5 minutes and 28. I mean, I had it down to but it was killing, and I waited for my laughs to peak, and and then I did again, and then about midway through my monologue, the stage manager creeps under the camera and goes, and I had to make an automatic, like Joe Namath winning the Super Bowl. I said, wait a minute, man. If I say goodnight now, I'll never be on this show again, because it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I had another 3 minutes to go. And I said, and if I do it, I'm going to keep killing. And when people say for the rest of my life, I'm a loser and I'm a bum, they say, how come you didn't do the Tonight Show anymore? I said, because I was too fucking funny. That's why. So I walked backstage, and Jim Macaulay was there, and he says, you will never do this show again. And I had a date with me, and I went with my agents, and they were clueless about it. They said, hey, you did 2 shows in one. I go, no, you don't understand. I'm fucked. I didn't do 2 shots in one. And we went out to the Palm in Santa Monica, or no, in Hollywood. I used to go there when after shots, and I was bemoaning the fact that I'll never get Tonight Show again. And I was so great on that shot. And then I look to my left, and there's Carson. He's actually at the restaurant, 1,000,000,000 to 1 shot.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have to think. I darted over there like an assassin, man.
Yeah.
I got on my knees and I started to plead with him. And we still had our state. I mean, the fact that he left the show, he lived in Malibu and stopped at the Palm. It was one of the comedy guards looking after me, because I said, I didn't want to stop it, Johnny. I was killing it. And I didn't want you to think I was unprofessional. And he was like going like this. He was afraid. You know, I was like Ruby. I was like Jack Ruby coming over.
Yeah.
And the next day I get a call from Macaulay, and he says, "All right, you're good." You know, no apologies. But, you know, at least I felt great having him call like that.
I have a funny Letterman story that happened recently. I was doing a set at the store, and this is just like in the last 6 months. It was a comic show. It was like sometimes comics produce shows in the main room. So I said I'd do this, right? So I'm waiting to go on stage in the main room. And the manager comes in, he goes, "Hey man, Letterman's here." And I'm like, "All right." He's like, "No, he's in the audience." And my first thought is like, am I in trouble? But the funny thing was, he had just come to see me for whatever reason. And we were on the back patio at the store there. And this is like, you know, Letterman now. And he was like, sort of like, the stuff you're doing is great. You know, no one's doing that kind of stuff. But we had a conversation. And what was amazing for me was that just in conversation, I was making him laugh. And it's that laugh. It's that Letterman laugh. It's the only thing you wanted as a young comic when I was coming up, is to get that laugh. And here we were on the patio of the store just having a casual conversation. But I still got that same feeling. Like, I just got Letterman, you know, I made him laugh, you know.
Oh, no, absolutely. And this is, you know, and when you get to know them, I was never close with Carson as a friend, you know, and I didn't go to his poker game. Not that I could ever afford it. That they, you know, they would have been, all right, 2,000 to you, to Steve Martin. That's 100,000, you know. And you know, Dave and I didn't hang out, but it's okay. I mean, and Leno, and it was a crazy time. But you know, listen, you know, Mark,
who are your friends? You know, I talked to it's so funny because like I'm kind of who was I talking to? I don't know, Mike Rowe. You know Mike Rowe, the
I've heard of him. I haven't. What, is he a comedian?
He was a comedian, but he's mostly a comedy writer. But we were just talking, and somehow or another, I kind of took a little shot at Alan Bursky, right? And I knew I'm like, he's going to text me. He's going to text me within 2 days.
Of course.
Alan Bursky's going to text me in 2 days. And he did. He texted me. He's like, you know, I know you made fun of me, but, you know, and then he actually sent me a YouTube of his Tonight Show. No one killed like, you know, Mike Douglas. He's something else, that guy.
Well, you know, for the people, he was a young comic. I think he went on stage when he was 4.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
His dad used to park cars at the store when Sammy had it.
I bet. But he also had a bad rep for a while in New York for stealing. And the first night he walked into Catch a Rising Star, Rick Newman, the late Rick Newman, great guy, he grabbed him by the collar and he threw him up against the wall. And we were all watching. He says, "If you fucking steal anything from my comedians, I'll fucking kill you."
Really?
And he really went to bat for us.
Well, it's funny because then he went on to have the reputation as being the guy who gave Freddie Prinze the gun.
Yeah, what a bio line.
Yeah, yeah, but he came on my show and he said, that's not true. So he cleared that up. You know, there's so few people that are talking about Alan, but he still acts as if like you know it's of utmost importance. But I get it. You know, he's sitting there and you know he's who he is. He's part of the history.
Yeah, he's part of the history, man. You know?
Yeah. But the first time I think I actually met you, you would never remember. I imagine we talked about, but it was when you were hosting the A-List.
Oh, gee, yeah.
So that was like before you got sober, I think.
Yeah, sure was.
Yeah,
I had I had jokes on a teleprompter.
Yeah, and I just couldn't get close to you. You know, you weren't really talking to people that much. But I remember the show because I had picked it up like you know, someone fell out, and I remember I was kind of sleeping with this publicist who had a connection, and they said, "You want to do the A-List?" I'm like, "All right, I don't have any clothes," so I borrowed a roommate's jacket. And it was funny because, I remember you, but I also remember the structure of that show. For some reason, you put the big headliner first and the newer guy second. And the guy on my show was Amazing Jonathan, the magician guy,
Right.
who I know. I think did he pass? I don't remember.
I don't
But
know.
his closing magic trick was he cut his arm off with a machete, right? And it was like this big thing. And I'd never heard this since, and I'd never heard it before this moment. But the stage manager comes up to me and goes, "All right, you're going to go on as soon as we clean up the blood."
Oh God. I before I got sober, I ran into some of these cats, and I had a flight in New York with Carson, with one of his wives, across the aisle from me. And I was with my girlfriend at the time. And I had then a lot of nervous tics and not tremors, blinking my eyes. But more than that, I would have these need to stare at people. It was a horrible habit.
Yeah.
So I'm on the aisle, first class, with this woman, and across the aisle is Carson and his wife. And every 30 seconds, I would go like this and stare at Johnny. And I knew that I was sabotaging myself. As a drug addict and an alcoholic, I was, forget the grandiosity. I wanted to ruin my career right on that flight, man.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend said, if you continue to stare at Carson, it's over. I can't help it, honey. And I turn around, I turn again. So we were going to Europe, and he was too. So we had to wait for our flights. So I see him up in the lounge, and just like at the Palm, I ran over to him again. I went, Johnny, look. And now he was laughing. Thank God. I went, I'm out of my fucking mind.
Yeah.
I'm drinking too much. I'm staring at people.
Yeah.
And he felt I was more comfortable with him at that moment than ever.
Yeah.
I just want to leave you. I'll tell you one offhanded, one Don Rickles thing. I did this ill-fated show with him in 92, 93. And I was just about ready. And the year after that, I got one more show shot, and then I got sober. But he used to have vodka in his dressing room, and my dressing room was next to his. And I wasn't really supposed to be drinking for myself, but that wasn't happening yet. So it's not even having balls. It's just how pathetic when you're getting ready to bottom out on everything.
Yeah.
What risks you'll take,
Yeah.
So and during rehearsal, I said, it's rehearsal. The script's going to change 20 times. I can have a little vodka, but I didn't bring any booze with me. But I knew that Don had a pint of vodka. I guess it's a pint. I forget.
In his dressing room.
Yeah, in his they had a little fridge.
Yeah.
So I would look down the hall, and if it was all clear, I'd walk into his dressing room. I'd open the fridge, and I'd pour just a little vodka in a cup, and then run back to my dressing room and pour my orange juice on it, and then and drink that. So I was doing this for about 2 weeks, and then finally we're walking to the set, scene 3, whatever, and I'm walking with Don's going. They used to call me the Bloodhound. I go, what are you talking about? Bloodhound?
Yeah.
Isn't that the kind of dog that they find? It's like a cadaver dog or something. A bloodhound? Am I wrong, Mark? Something about a bloodhound where police would use.
Yeah.
It was like he was like a police dog. He went. I don't do impressions. So he says, I know everything you do. I know everything you do. I go, what are you talking about? He says, don't say that. He says, I don't care what you do with your life. He said, I don't care if you drink, do drugs. I don't care who you're fucking. I don't care what you do. Just there's only one thing you have to know. Do not ever take my booze out of my dressing room or you'll be sorry. And at first I went, what are you, nuts?
Yeah.
Why would I do that? He says, don't go there.
Yeah.
I know you did it. I mean, he nailed me. So for the rest of the short-lived series that we only did about 11 shows, every time I would yell at him, because I was pretty straight when we shot the show, but if he never knew any lines. He never knew any lines. It wasn't that he was loaded. He just hated to memorize. And your show, when the script comes down, it changes all the time. He hated that shit. If he did one line, he would just give like a champion thing. So whenever during rehearsal, Mark, when I would say, God damn it, Don, let's just do this fucking one scene right, man. Come on, let's get out of here.
Yeah.
And he would look at me and he would go, and he blackmailed me for the entire 6 months. When he did this, I knew that he was going to tell my management, he was going to tell producers. So he had me by the fucking balls. But I was so in love with him. It was like being with the Rat Pack.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this so much. This has been so sweet for me to have you here. I don't want to keep you hostage any longer. I love you. Your work
What's going on with how's Kitty Bruce doing?
Well, Kitty, she has a fund, with comics, helping comics, and but she's not doing well. I'm trying to. I mean, I made these pleas. I said any comic out there who's on stage, even if you just say, "Oh, fuck this," and don't have great premises, whatever, give money to help Lenny's kid. She's running out of dough, and people who are close to do the best are trying to help. But it's frustrating. She lives out in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. Yeah. But she's a sweet ex-heroin addict. She's been sober and clean a long time. Yeah. I love her, and thanks for bringing it. And you can go and Google, her fund. And if you want to donate anything to Lenny's kid, that would be sweet. And
what about you? What's going on with the prognosis and the medicines? And you seem good.
Well, and that's why and Joyce, I love you. I'm sorry I brought you up in the beginning, but the last 4 years I had, I can't believe that. I can't believe it now. And I fell twice, and that led to 4 surgeries. So I was on my, it was 4 hospitals, 3 rehabs, pain, it sucked. But then they diagnosed me with Parkinson's, and I was sort of in shock. I said, I was 73 or so when they told me, and I'm 76 now. I said, Jesus, what does that mean? And what it means is, you don't have to, people call me up now and they send me, they say, you'll be fine. My father had it. He was in bad shape, but you'll be, no one knows what to say. And I feel, I haven't been reaching out much to people because I put myself in their shoes. What do you say? Richard, how is, I don't know what to tell you, except I have problems walking. It's called freezing. Yeah. And all this, and it's such a mind fuck because your brain, you're walking, and I take this dopamine pills every 4 hours.
That's good.
And I have to. Yeah. But when it starts to wear down, Mark, I'm walking, and all of a sudden my brain says, hey man, you ain't going nowhere, Jack. That's it. You can't walk. And
it's great though. You finally you can do straight stand-up spots.
I have no choice. I have no choice. They'll have to wheel me out on the training wheels. Well, maybe.
But you should do like it seems like I don't know how you're handling it in terms of what you're telling yourself, but it seems like it could be a pretty rich topic for Richard Lewis style comedy. You just have to do it sitting down.
Well, I'll tell you, and people have said that. I appreciate that. I'm trying. If I can throw this shit into creativity, when I start writing, even Larry said you have a lot to say. But I was talking to my wife today. I said, if I write I'm not a playwright, and I'm not. I wrote some screenplays and stuff, but I'm a comedian. I think Dickey said, a Southern novelist. He said, writers write. And I wrote 24 hours a day with pad in my pocket. At funerals, anywhere I was, I'm writing. You do the same thing. Then I'd come back and put it in my computer. And I had hundreds of thousands of premises. So that's really what I do. But I lived to write. So now I'm home a lot. And I'm not sure, it lends itself to a play more than stand-up because I'm not going on the road anymore. I had a great tour at the end of 80s or 2019 or 18. Yeah. I was at the top of my game. I did great, but I don't know what I'm going to do. It's difficult. But again, I'm quoting my wife a lot, but she says this could be, I'll look back on today, talking with you and feeling good and not freezing. And feeling a part of comedy history, talking to you and you talking to me. I mean, we're brothers of sorts, and and she says this is going to be the best day that you're going to look back on and remember this. So I
Yeah.
have to think, I have to live my life that way. You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Sure.
I just want to tell you that, you know, I was so knocked out by your last special. I would, and the way you incorporated your grieving
Yeah.
into the show was magnificent. And you know, and I have to ask you then the same. How are you doing?
I'm okay. You know, lately, I'm still out there hammering away every night, like we do. I did a set last night and but I'll tell you that talking, being able to sort of ride that line that we like to ride with grief, in stand up, it took me a long time to work that stuff out because a lot of times it was just sad. And it took me a long time to sort of find that line where the humor would carry the grief. The grief is inevitable; it's there. So what do you do to sort of elevate the humor so it balances the grief? And somehow I found that line. And I'll tell you, having done that, I'm tired of talking about the end of the world and climate change and fascism, and I did that in that
Right.
special too. But like lately, I've been just trying to talk about my personal trauma and my, more sensitive stuff, more vulnerable stuff, because I found that by doing that stuff about Lynn, it gave me a confidence in my authentic self that I didn't really have before, where I could slow it down and sort of believe that I can elevate some of this stuff that's very difficult to humor. So lately I've just been doing stuff that's sort of very sort of personal and kind of heavy, but knowing that I can ride it through to get pretty big deep laughs out of it. So
Wow.
yeah, I'm okay. I'm terrified of this and that all the time, but mostly I stay busy and I'm just fucking I just do stand up all the time still, man.
That's a gift that you have and we have. It's sort of taken away from me now unless I follow your lead and they just freeze me and roll me out there on training wheels, or if I sit on I remember hearing that some older comics, I think it was Cosby, who was sat on he would always be on like a lounge chair for three
Yeah.
hours. That's not me. So I don't know what I'm going to do except
Well,
I'm
I
just
I started doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. You could do that. It's like it's interesting that I started sitting down. Like I used to sit down during sets where I was bombing, because like if I go all in and I'm doing everything I can to get the laughs and they're not coming, a lot of times I would sit down just to make them believe that it wasn't bothering me. And
that's
sometimes
great.
yeah, and sometimes I would stay longer than I should, even when I was bombing, because I didn't want them to walk out saying, like, well, he didn't try. So
I know. If we spoke for 5 hours, I would have a lot of cross references that because that's why one of the reasons I love you is because I so understand your craft and I so respect it. But I did a similar thing when I was bombing. I would say I'm going to bomb on my own terms now, and I would start doing the most esoteric shit.
yeah,
As long as
yeah,
they're not going to laugh at the good shit, yeah.
yeah,
Now you're not going
yeah,
to laugh at some really good shit. You
right.
know.
Yeah, fuck them. But but what I was going to say is like, if you ever wanted to, try to, do a night where, I kind of moderate a conversation with you somewhere, we could do that. And then, maybe you could just sit there and you could sort of explore some of some of the stuff you're going through. If you can turn a corner on it, whether it's through gratitude or acceptance and start to see the humor in it, let me know. And maybe we could
But
do.
just before you go, where would that venue be? In the middle of a comedy store lineup?
No,
I
no,
mean,
no. I mean, there's a place that I work shit out all the time. It's called Dynasty Typewriter. It seats about 200. It's a small black box theater, down in a building that Genji Cohen owns. It's a good little venue. I do when I'm working out, when I'm free forming to build hours, I do like a series of Tuesdays there. But I'm sure they would love to do it. And and we're talking an audience of 200. I mean, it's low stakes, but it might get you out. And if it would make you feel better for me to sit there with you and do an in conversation thing, I'd love to do that.
that's really one of the nicest things anyone has said to me in a lot of years. I want to thank you for being here, Mark.
Yeah, man.
I adore you, man, and I'm going to take you up on that because as long as I don't have to prepare them, and I used to live for preparation, but now I'm sort of want to just fly by the seat of my pants. Another phrase I rarely use,
Yeah.
but I'll be in touch with you, and I'll try to get you out of your hood to
Yeah,
bring
man.
I'll bring a corned beef sandwich down here, and we'll discuss my first time back on stage. And I think I would need you there, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. It would be fun, and it would. I think that people who love you would come out, and it might just whatever happens, at least you'll engage and you'll feel better, and what? Who gives a shit? You know what I mean?
Right, and I can donate any money I can donate it to Kitty Bruce.
Of course, and also like don't be a stranger. You know what I mean? If you're feeling down, we're comic brothers, we're sober brothers, but just reach out anytime, buddy.
Okay, pal. Thanks, Mark. I
I
love you,
love you.
buddy. I'll speak to you soon.
I love you too, man.
Take
Take it.
care.
All right,
All right,
bye.
bye. Bye bye. Wow.